The rain came down in sheets, turning the countryside road into a river of mud as Duke Edward Ashford urged his horse forward through the storm. 6 months. 6 months of searching, 6 months of guilt eating him alive, 6 months of waking up in cold sweats, seeing Thomas's body in that field. The old farm cottage appeared through the rain like a ghost, windows dark, roof sagging. He'd forgotten this place even existed on his property. Edward dismounted, water streaming down his face, and pushed open the door that hung crooked on its hinges. The smell hit him first, not decay or abandonment, but bread, fresh bread. His hand went to the pistol at his belt as he stepped inside, boots squelching on the wooden floor. A fire had burned in the hearth recently. Clean dishes sat stacked beside a wash basin. Women's clothing, simple, plain, nothing like what a lady would wear, hung drying near the cold fireplace. His heart started pounding. Someone was living here, on his land, in secret. He heard it then, the soft creak of floorboards from the back room, and his hand tightened on the pistol grip. The door opened slowly. A woman stood there, belly swollen with late pregnancy, hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing a dress that belonged on a farmer's wife. Her face was thinner than he remembered, cheeks hollow, but those eyes, God, those eyes he'd spent 10 years trying not to stare at across dinner tables and ballrooms. Edward. She whispered his name like a curse, like a prayer, like the ending of something. Her hand went to her stomach, protective, defensive. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Helena Carstairs, widow of his best friend, the woman he'd turned England upside down looking for, standing in his forgotten cottage dressed like a peasant and carrying Thomas's child. "You're alive." The words came out strangled. She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Did you hope I wasn't? I've been searching for you since you killed my husband." Her voice cracked on the words, and he watched her eyes fill with tears she refused to let fall. Get out of my house." "Your house?" He found his voice, found his anger, because anger was easier than the relief flooding through him that she was alive. She was safe. She was here. "This is my property, Helena. Every inch of this land belongs to me. So you're going to tell me why you disappeared, why you're living like this, and why the hell you think I killed Thomas." She gripped the doorframe, and he saw it then. Her hands, rough, calloused, the hands of someone who'd been doing hard labor. The nails broken and dirty. Those hands that used to play piano at his dinner parties, soft and elegant, now looked like they belonged to a servant. "I told you to leave." But her voice shook. He stepped closer and she flinched. The movement cut him deeper than any blade. "I'm not leaving until you explain. I'm not leaving until you tell me what happened. And I'm sure as hell not leaving you alone in this condition." He gestured to her belly, and something flickered across her face. Shame, maybe, or fear. 6 months pregnant, Helena. Living in a rotting cottage. No servants, no doctor, no one to help you. What were you thinking? "I was thinking I never wanted to see your face again." She lifted her chin, defiant even with tears tracking down her cheeks. "I was thinking I couldn't bear to look at the man who destroyed everything." "I didn't." "You did!" She screamed it, and the sound echoed in the small space. Her hand pressed harder against her belly, and he saw her wince. "You think I don't know? You think Thomas didn't know? He wrote it all down, Edward. Every word, every suspicion, every truth about you and me and what you wanted." His blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "His diary." She spat the words. "I read it before I left. Before I ran from everyone and everything because I couldn't face what we'd done. We didn't do anything, didn't we?" She moved closer now, close enough that he could smell the soap she'd used, something cheap and plain. "Tell me you didn't love me, Edward. Tell me you didn't spend 10 years watching me, wanting me, pretending to be Thomas's loyal friend while you were waiting for your chance." He couldn't. God help him. He couldn't lie to her face. Not now. Not after everything. "That's what I thought." She turned away, hand on the wall to steady herself. "Thomas wrote that you finally confessed, that you told him you'd always loved me, that he'd stolen the only woman who mattered from you. Is that what you said to him the week before he died? Is that why he—" Her voice broke completely. "Why he went out that day and put a bullet through his own heart?" Edward felt the world tilt. "No, no, Helena. I never said that to him. I never—" "Liar." She whirled back, and now the tears were falling freely. "I know you loved me. I always knew. Everyone knew. The way you looked at me at parties, the way you found excuses to visit. The way you'd turn the pages when I played piano and your hands would shake when you got too close. I knew, Edward. And God forgive me, part of me liked it. Part of me wanted you to look at me like that, because Thomas was kind and good, but he was safe and you—" She stopped, pressing her fist to her mouth. "You were dangerous. You were everything I couldn't have, and it destroyed my husband." The confession hung between them like smoke. Edward's mind raced, trying to piece together what she was saying, what Thomas had written, what had actually happened in those final days. "I never told him anything." His voice was steady now, hard. "I never spoke a word about my feelings to Thomas. Whatever he wrote in that diary, whatever he believed, it wasn't because of something I said." "Then why?" She almost screamed it. "Why would he write it? Why would he go out that morning and—" She stopped, hand flying to her mouth again. "The gun. His own gun. I heard the shot from the house. I ran. I found you standing over his body with blood on your hands, and you looked at me like you'd been caught. Like you knew." Edward's jaw clenched. He remembered that day with crystal clarity. The way Thomas had been drinking since dawn. The way he'd insisted on the hunt even though Edward tried to cancel. The shot that came from somewhere in the trees. Running to find his best friend on the ground, chest torn open, eyes already empty. And then Helena appearing, screaming, accusing. "I didn't kill him." He said each word carefully. "I found him. That's what you saw. Me finding him. Not me killing him. I don't believe you." But her voice wavered. "You need to sit down." He moved toward her, and she backed away. "Helena, you're pregnant and exhausted, and you're going to hurt yourself. Just please, sit down, let me make tea, and then we'll talk about this like rational people instead of—" "Rational?" She laughed again, that bitter sound. "There's nothing rational about any of this. About you being here, about me—" She stopped, looking down at her belly. "About this baby, who'll never know his father because someone took him away. I didn't take him away." Edward forced himself to stay calm, even though everything in him wanted to grab her shoulders and make her listen. "But I'm going to figure out what happened. I'm going to prove it to you." "Why?" She looked up at him, exhausted and broken. "Why does it matter? Thomas is gone. I'm ruined. This child will be born in secret in a cottage where no one can see the widow's shame. What difference does it make if you killed him or not? It makes every difference." He stepped closer, and this time she didn't move away. "Because you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be alone. And that baby, Thomas's baby, deserves better than this." Something cracked in her expression. "Don't pretend you care about Thomas's baby. I care about you." The words came out before he could stop them, raw and honest. "I've always cared about you, and I'll be damned if I let you do this alone just because you believe a lie." She stared at him for a long moment, hand on her belly, tears still wet on her cheeks. Then she moved past him to the chair by the dead fire and sank into it like a puppet with cut strings. "Make your tea, then." Her voice was hollow. "Tell me your version. Convince me if you can. But I'm not leaving this cottage, Edward. This is the only place I'm safe from everyone who wants to control me, judge me, take this baby from me. So if you're staying here too." He didn't go back to the manor house that night. Edward built up the fire while Helena sat silent in her chair, watching him with those eyes that had haunted his dreams for a decade. He found tea in the cupboard, cheap stuff, nothing like what she used to drink, and made it the way he remembered she liked it. Lots of milk, 1 sugar. When he handed her the cup, their fingers brushed, and electricity shot through him the same way it always had. She pulled back quickly, but not before he saw her breath catch. "You remembered." She spoke to the tea, not to him. "How I take my tea. After all this time, I remember everything about you." He poured his own cup and sat across from her in the only other chair. "What you wore to the first dinner party Thomas brought you to. Green silk. How you laughed at his terrible jokes. How you played Chopin better than anyone I'd ever heard. How you hated oysters but ate them at formal dinners anyway because it was expected." She looked up at him then, something shifting in her expression. "Stop it." "Stop what?" "Telling the truth. Stop making me remember that you noticed, that you cared. It makes everything worse." She set down her cup with shaking hands. "I need to show you something." She stood, moving slowly, and went to a small trunk in the corner. When she opened it, Edward saw everything, her old life packed away. Fine dresses crushed into the space, jewelry, books, and on top a leather-bound journal, Thomas's diary. Helena brought it back, held it out to him. "Read it. Read what he wrote about us. Then tell me I'm wrong. Edward took the journal like it was made of glass. The leather was worn, familiar. He'd seen Thomas writing in this 1,000 times. He opened to the marked page, dated 1 week before the hunting accident. The handwriting was Thomas's, but wrong somehow. Shaky. Desperate. Helena grows more distant every day. I see the way she looks at Edward when she thinks I'm not watching. And Edward, God, I've known for years, known he loved her. But yesterday, when I confronted him, he finally admitted it. Said he'd always loved her, that I stole his chance at happiness, that every time he visited, every dinner at his house was torture watching us together. What kind of friend does that? What kind of man covets his best friend's wife? Edward's hands clenched on the journal. This is impossible. Helena, I swear to you, I never said this to him. I never confronted. We never had this conversation. Then how did he know? She leaned forward, desperate for him to explain it away. How did he know exactly what you felt if you never told him? I don't know. He kept reading, flipping through earlier entries. But look at this. Look at the dates. These entries get more and more paranoid, more erratic. Helena, does this sound like the Thomas you knew? The walls whisper about them. I hear servants talking, but when I turn, they're silent. Everyone knows. Everyone sees. This isn't rational thought. This is, what? She wrapped her arms around herself. What are you saying? I'm saying something was wrong with him. Edward closed the journal carefully. Helena, in these last months, did Thomas act differently? Say strange things? Become suspicious or angry for no reason? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. He had nightmares. Would wake up screaming about betrayal. About me leaving him for you. I tried to comfort him, but he'd push me away, say I was lying, that he could see the truth in my eyes. She wrapped her arms tighter. And once, she stopped. Once what? Once he grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised. She pulled back her sleeve, and Edward saw the faint yellow mark still there. He said I was meeting you in secret, that everyone in the house knew. I told him it wasn't true, that I'd never, but he wouldn't listen. He locked me in our bedroom for 2 days, said it was for my own good, to keep me away from temptation. Edward's blood boiled. He hurt you and you didn't tell anyone? Who would I tell? She looked at him with hollow eyes. My husband was a viscount. I was his property. And I knew if I told you, you'd kill him. I could see it in the way you watched us sometimes, like you knew something was wrong. So I said nothing. I smiled at parties. I played my piano. I pretended everything was perfect. Jesus, Helena. He set down the journal and ran his hands through his hair. I should have seen it. Should have known something. How could you? She cut him off. He hid it well. Most of the time he was still Thomas, still kind, still the man I married. It was just those moments, those episodes, where he became someone else entirely. She looked at the journal. I thought it was my fault. Thought maybe I had encouraged you somehow. That my guilt over noticing your attention had made him suspicious. You didn't encourage anything. Edward leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I made sure of that. I never touched you inappropriately. Never said anything improper. I kept my distance as much as I could while still being his friend. But you're right. I did love you. From that first night. And it was torture watching you with him, but I never would have acted on it. Never would have betrayed him that way. But you wanted to. Her eyes met his, challenging. Didn't you? Wanted to touch me. Wanted to tell me. Wanted to... Yes. The word came out rough. God, yes. Every time you laughed, every time you played piano, every time you walked into a room, I wanted to tell you that you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I wanted to touch your hand, your face. I wanted to kiss you until neither of us could breathe. But wanting and doing are different things, Helena. I never betrayed Thomas, not in action, only in thought. The air between them crackled with tension. Helena's breath came faster, her hand on her belly again in that protective gesture. And now, her voice was barely audible, now that he's gone, now that I'm here in front of you, do you still want those things? He held her gaze, let her see everything he'd hidden for 10 years, every second of every day. She stood abruptly, moving to the window. Rain still pounded against the glass. You need to leave. No. He stood too. I'm not leaving you here alone. Not pregnant. Not without help. Not while you're still in danger. Danger from what? From whoever wrote those lies to Thomas. He picked up the journal again. These entries, Helena, they're too specific, too detailed. Someone was feeding him information, real or false. Someone wanted him to believe we were betraying him. And if that person is still out there, you think someone wanted him dead? She turned, eyes wide. Someone orchestrated this. I don't know yet. He came closer, slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. But I'm going to find out. And until I do, I'm staying here. I'll sleep in this room. You keep the bedroom, but I'm not letting you face this alone anymore. The servants will talk. But her resistance was crumbling. Let them talk. I've spent 10 years caring what people think, and it got me nothing. Thomas is dead. You're alone. And I'll be damned if I let propriety stop me from protecting you now. She searched his face for a long moment, then nodded, just once. Fine. But you don't get to interrogate me. You don't get to hover. You stay, you help with the cottage work, and we figure this out together. Deal? Deal. He held out his hand. She looked at it for a heartbeat, then reached out and shook it. The contact sent fire through his veins, and from the way her eyes widened, she felt it too. They broke apart quickly. I should sleep. She moved toward the bedroom. The baby makes me tired. Helena? She paused at the door. I didn't kill him, and I'm going to prove it to you. 3 days of living in close quarters taught Edward more about Helena than 10 years of formal dinners ever had. She woke before dawn, built the fire with practiced efficiency, made simple breakfast, porridge, bread she'd baked herself, weak tea. She worked constantly, mending clothes, tending the small vegetable garden behind the cottage despite the rain, washing dishes with those rough, broken hands, and she did it all in silence, like she'd forgotten how to make conversation. Edward found himself doing things a duke had never done, chopping wood, hauling water from the well, fixing the leak in the roof that dripped into the bedroom. His valet would have fainted, seeing him covered in dirt and sweat. But Helena watched him sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, and he caught something in her expression that might have been respect. On the third night, after a dinner of rabbit stew he'd hunted and she'd cooked, they sat by the fire, and he broke the silence. Tell me about the last week before Thomas died. Everything you remember. She was quiet so long he thought she'd refuse. Then she set down her mending. He got a letter, hand-delivered, no return address. After he read it, he went white, locked himself in his study for hours. When he came out, he looked at me like I was a stranger. What did the letter say? I don't know. He burned it in the fireplace while I watched. But after that, he started asking questions. About my schedule, about who I'd seen, where I'd been. He asked the servants, too. I heard him interrogating the maids about whether I'd had visitors when he was away. Edward leaned forward. Did he mention my name? Constantly. Her voice went flat. He'd say things like, I suppose Edward will be visiting tomorrow, or, does Edward know you're shopping in town today? Like he was testing me, waiting for me to confess something I hadn't done. And the day of the hunt? He was drunk by breakfast. I begged him not to go, but he insisted, said he needed to clear his head, needed to talk to you about something important. She looked at Edward. Did he? Did he say anything unusual that morning? He was quiet, distant, wouldn't meet my eyes. Edward remembered the cold feeling he'd had all morning. I suggested we cancel, but he loaded his gun and headed into the woods. I followed to make sure he was all right. And then he stopped. Then I heard the shot, found him on the ground, his gun beside him, no one else around. You think he killed himself? She said it flatly. I think it's possible. He chose his words carefully. Helena, if he was having episodes, if someone was feeding him false information, if he believed his wife and best friend were betraying him, a man in that state might do something desperate. No. She shook her head violently. No, Thomas wouldn't. He wouldn't leave me, leave the baby. He was excited about being a father, even in those last days when everything else was falling apart. Was he? Edward pressed gently. Or was he suspicious about the baby too? Her face crumpled. Oh God. The words came out as a sob. He asked me once if I was sure the baby was his. I thought he was joking. I laughed. But he wasn't joking, Edward. He really believed. She couldn't finish. Edward moved to her without thinking, pulled her into his arms even though he knew he shouldn't. She resisted for a second, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his shirt. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her hair, the other carefully avoiding her swollen belly. I'm sorry, he murmured it over and over. I'm so sorry for everything you went through, everything you're still going through. You shouldn't have been alone in this. I chose to be alone. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. After the funeral, Thomas's family made it clear they blamed me. Said I'd driven him to desperation with my behavior. The scandal would have destroyed me, destroyed the baby's reputation. So I took what money I had and ran. Found this place by accident. Thought I could just disappear. You can't disappear. He kept his hands on her shoulders, felt her trembling. Helena, Thomas's family will be looking for you. For the baby. You're carrying the Carstairs heir. They're not going to let that go. I know. Her voice broke again. That's why I can't go back. They'll take the baby from me. Say I'm unfit. Lock me away somewhere and raise my child as their own. I won't let that happen. You can't stop them. She looked up at him, desperate. You're a duke. But they're viscounts with connections and money and the law on their side. A widow has no rights, Edward. This baby is my husband's property, not mine. Then marry me. The words came out before he could stop them. Her eyes went wide. What? Marry me. He said it again, more firmly. After the baby is born. Marry me and then you'll have a duke's protection. They can't touch you or the child then. You're insane. She tried to pull away, but he held firm. You can't marry me. The scandal would... I don't care about scandal. He meant it. I've spent my whole life doing what was expected, being proper, hiding what I felt. And it got me nothing but watching you suffer. So marry me, Helena. Not because you love me, not because of what we feel or don't feel, but because it's the only way to keep you both safe. She stared at him, searching his face. You'd do that? Marry your best friend's widow? Raise his child as your own? Destroy your reputation? In a heartbeat. Something shifted in her expression. Her hand came up slowly, hesitated, then touched his face. The gesture was so tentative, so fragile, that Edward's breath caught. I don't deserve you, she whispered. You deserve better than me. Better than this mess. I don't want better. He turned his head, pressed a kiss to her palm. I want you, I've always wanted you. The air between them charged with electricity. Helena's breathing quickened. Edward could feel her pulse racing under his hands on her shoulders. Then someone knocked on the door and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Helena's hand went to her belly, eyes wide. Edward moved in front of her, protective, and called out, Who is it? Dr. Pierce, here to check on my patient. The voice was cultured, educated, carrying a hint of disapproval. Edward looked at Helena. You have a doctor. He found me 2 months ago, she whispered. Figured out who I was. He's been helping me, bringing supplies. Edward, please, be civil. He's the only friend I have. Edward opened the door to find a man in his 40s, well-dressed, carrying a medical bag, looking at him with barely concealed hostility. And you are? Pierce's tone could have frozen water. Duke Edward Ashford. Edward didn't move aside. A friend of the family. How convenient. Pierce's eyes narrowed. Lady Carstairs, is this man bothering you? No. Helena moved beside Edward, though he noticed she didn't touch him. The Duke is helping me with some matters regarding my late husband's estate. I see. Pierce clearly didn't believe it. Well, if His Grace would excuse us, I need to examine you, privately. Every protective instinct Edward had roared in protest, but Helena gave him a slight nod. He stepped outside into the rain, but positioned himself where he could see through the window, watched Pierce help Helena to the chair, his hands gentle but lingering too long, watched him check her pulse, listen to her belly, speak quietly while she nodded, and felt jealousy tear through him like a blade. This man had been here for months. This man had cared for her when Edward hadn't known where she was. This man clearly wanted more than to be her doctor. When Pierce finally emerged, he pulled the door shut behind him and faced Edward. Whatever you're doing here, Your Grace, I suggest you leave. That's not going to happen. Pierce stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do you have any idea what you're risking for her? Every day you stay, you make the scandal worse. When people find out the Duke of Ashford is living in a cottage with his best friend's pregnant widow, let them talk. She can't afford that. Pierce's control cracked. She's already ruined, already hiding. You being here makes everything worse, unless... His eyes went hard. Unless you're planning to marry her, are you? Edward held his gaze. Yes. Pierce actually stepped back. You're serious. Completely. She'll never agree. Helena is too proud, too damaged by everything that's happened. She won't accept charity from anyone, especially not... It's not charity. Edward cut him off. And it's between me and her. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on my patient. He brushed past Pierce and went back inside. Helena was still in the chair, looking exhausted. When she saw Edward's face, something flickered in her expression. "He told you to leave, didn't he?" "He did." Edward knelt beside her chair. "And I told him no. Helena, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "What? Do you have feelings for Dr. Pierce?" She blinked, surprised. "What? No. He's been kind, but no." "Edward, why would you think? Because he looks at you the way I look at you." The words came out rough. "And he's been here, helping you, when I couldn't. I just need to know if—" "Stop." She put her hand on his face again, that same tentative gesture. "There's only ever been two men I've looked at that way. Thomas, who I married, and you, who I couldn't have. That's it. No one else. Not ever." Relief flooded through him. He covered her hand with his, held it against his face. "Good. You're jealous." She said it with something that might have been wonder. "Of a country doctor. I'm jealous of anyone who gets to be near you when I can't. Anyone who makes you smile. Anyone who—" He stopped. "Yes, I'm jealous. I've been jealous for 10 years. "Edward." She breathed his name, and it sounded completely different than the way she'd said it that first night. Not a curse now, something else, something that made his heart race. Then she winced, hand going to her belly. "The baby?" He was on his feet instantly. "Do I need to get Pierce back?" "No." She smiled, tired but real. "The baby's just moving. Here." She took his hand, guided it to her belly. Under his palm he felt it, the unmistakable flutter of life. Thomas's child, moving inside the woman Edward loved. The moment should have been painful, should have reminded him of everything he'd lost, everything he'd never have. Instead, it felt sacred. That's incredible. He kept his hand there, felt another kick. Strong, he's going to be strong. Or she. Helena covered his hand with hers. The baby could be a girl. Then she'll be strong too. He looked up at her. Like her mother, their eyes locked. The cottage was quiet except for the rain and the crackle of the fire. Edward's hand on her belly, her hand over his, the baby moving between them. The moment stretched, intimate and impossible. "I should sleep," Helena whispered, but she didn't move. "It's late," Edward agreed, but didn't take his hand away. The air between them was so charged he could barely breathe. The storm that rolled in the next morning was worse than anything Edward had seen in years. Rain pounded the roof until he thought it might cave in. Wind howled through every crack in the walls. Lightning split the sky in jagged white lines, and thunder shook the cottage foundations, and neither of them could leave. Edward spent the morning reinforcing the shutters, while Helena tried to cook breakfast with supplies running dangerously low. They moved around each other in the small space like dancers learning choreography, careful not to touch, hyper-aware of every breath. "We need more firewood." Helena watched the dwindling stack by the hearth. "At this rate, we'll run out by tonight. I'll get it after the lightning stops." Edward hammered another nail into the shutter. "I'm not risking you getting struck. I've been getting my own firewood for months, and now you don't have to." He caught the flash of irritation in her eyes and almost smiled. "You're not used to being taken care of, are you?" "I'm not used to being treated like I'm helpless." She set down the pot she'd been stirring with more force than necessary. "I've survived this long alone, Edward. I don't need—" Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the windows, and Helena jumped. Edward crossed the room without thinking, pulled her into his arms again. This time she didn't resist, just pressed her face against his chest. "I hate storms." Her voice was muffled. "Always have." "I know." He stroked her hair. "Remember the summer party at Ashford Hall? The lightning storm during dinner? You made jokes all through dessert to keep me from panicking." She pulled back enough to look at him. "Thomas didn't even notice I was frightened. But you did. I always noticed." He couldn't look away from her. "Everything about you. What made you smile, what made you nervous, what you loved and hated. I couldn't help it. That must have been torture." Her hand rested on his chest, right over his heart. "Knowing all of that, and not being able to—" "It was." He covered her hand with his. "But I'd do it all again. Every dinner, every party, every moment of wanting you. Because it meant I got to be near you. Edward." She breathed his name and her eyes dropped to his mouth. The cottage felt impossibly small. The rain disappeared. The thunder faded. There was just Helena looking at him like she'd been wanting to for years, her hand on his chest, his arms around her. "We shouldn't." But she didn't move away. "We should wait until—" "Until what?" His voice came out rough. Until we're married, until the baby is born, until some arbitrary point where it's acceptable. Helena, I've waited 10 years. I've been honorable and patient and respectful, and right now I don't want to be any of those things. What do you want to be? Honest. He cupped her face with both hands. I want to kiss you. I've wanted to kiss you since the moment Thomas brought you to that first dinner party in your green dress, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. She searched his eyes, and he let her see everything. All the hunger, all the years of restraint, all the desperate need he'd buried for a decade. I want that too. The words were barely a whisper. God help me, I've wanted that too, even when I shouldn't have, even when I was married and it was wrong, and… He kissed her. Couldn't wait another second. Just pulled her close and kissed her the way he'd dreamed about for 10 years. She made a sound against his mouth, surprise or relief or surrender, and then she was kissing him back. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. Her mouth opened under his, and the taste of her was everything he'd imagined and nothing like it. Better. Real. His. The baby kicked between them, a reminder of reality, but Edward couldn't stop, didn't want to stop. He gentled the kiss, made it softer, deeper, poured everything he felt into it. Years of longing, months of fear, the relief of finding her, the desperate need to protect her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Helena's eyes were wet with tears. I'm sorry. She touched her fingers to her lips, looking dazed. I shouldn't have, you shouldn't have, don't. He kept his hands on her face, made her look at him. Don't apologize. Don't regret this. How can I not? Fresh tears spilled over. Thomas has been dead 6 months. I'm carrying his child, and I just kissed you like I've been wanting to. What does that make me? Human. He wiped her tears with his thumbs. It makes you human, Helena. You're allowed to feel things, allowed to want things, even things that complicated. But the baby is Thomas's baby, I know that, you know that. And when we marry, I'll raise that child with love and respect for who the father was. But that doesn't mean we have to stop living, stop feeling, stop wanting each other. She pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. It's too soon, too fast. I'm still mourning. And we're what? He wanted to reach for her again, but forced himself to give her space. We're finally admitting what's been true for 10 years? What's wrong with that? Everything. She spun to face him, eyes blazing. Everything is wrong with it. You're supposed to be his friend. I'm supposed to be his widow. This, she gestured between them, shouldn't feel this good, shouldn't feel right. I should feel guilty, but all I feel is… She stopped. What? He moved closer. What do you feel? Alive. The word came out broken. For the first time in months, maybe years, I feel alive, and I hate myself for it. Thunder crashed again, and she flinched. Edward closed the distance, pulled her back into his arms despite her protests. Then hate yourself later. Right now, just let me hold you. Let yourself feel safe for 1 goddamn minute. She resisted for a heartbeat, then collapsed against him. They sank to the floor together, Edward's back against the wall, Helena between his legs, her head on his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, careful of the baby, always careful, and just held her while the storm raged outside. Tell me about him. Helena's voice was quiet. About Thomas. When you were young, before I came along. Edward stroked her hair, thinking. He was reckless, brave, got us in trouble constantly. I was the serious one, trying to be the perfect Duke's heir. Thomas would drag me into adventures, sneaking out of school, riding too fast, betting on cards we couldn't afford to lose. He smiled at the memories. He made life fun. When did you know? She tilted her head to look up at him. That something was wrong with him. I didn't. The guilt ate at him. I should have seen it. The paranoia, the mood swings, the drinking, but I wanted to believe everything was fine, that you were happy, that he was taking care of you the way you deserved. He tried. She reached back, found Edward's hand, laced their fingers together. In the beginning he really tried. But the last year, Edward, it was like living with a stranger. Someone who looked like Thomas but wasn't. The man I married wouldn't have locked me in a room, wouldn't have accused me of things I never did, wouldn't have hurt me. I should have protected you. You didn't know. She squeezed his hand. No one knew. He was so good at pretending in public. All the servants saw was a devoted husband. All our friends saw was a happy couple. I saw the truth. His voice went hard. Maybe not all of it, but I saw enough. Saw how you'd flinch sometimes when he touched you, how you'd make excuses to leave parties early, how you stopped playing piano at our dinners because he'd criticize every note. You noticed that too? She turned in his arms, awkward with her belly but determined to face him. Edward, you can't blame yourself. Thomas was sick. His mind was... Whatever happened to him, it wasn't your fault. And it wasn't mine. We both need to believe that. Can you? He searched her face. Believe it wasn't your fault? She was quiet for a long moment. I'm trying. Some days I think I can. Other days I wake up and remember his face the day he died. How desperate he looked, how lost. And I wonder if I'd just tried harder, been better somehow. Don't. He gripped her shoulders. Helena, you were perfect. Are perfect. Nothing you could have done would have changed what was happening in his mind. How do you know? Because I watched you try. His voice cracked. For years I watched you work so hard to make him happy. You learned to shoot because he loved hunting. You redecorated the whole house because he wanted it a certain way. You smiled through every criticism, every mood swing, every time he treated you like you were less than you were. And it was never enough for him. Not because you weren't enough, but because his mind was broken. She started crying again, and Edward pulled her close, let her sob into his shoulder while the storm raged, and the fire crackled and the world outside disappeared. When her tears finally slowed, she pulled back enough to look at him. I'm scared. The admission came out small. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of how much I want this, even though it's wrong. Of what happens when the baby comes and reality sets in, and you realize you've tied yourself to a scandal. She touched his face. I'm scared you'll regret choosing me. Never. He said it with absolute certainty. Helena, I've spent 10 years regretting not fighting for you, not telling Thomas how I felt, not finding a way to make you mine. I'm not making that mistake again. Whatever happens, whatever scandal, whatever price I have to pay, you're worth it. You can't know that. I do know that. He leaned his forehead against hers. You're the only thing I've ever been sure of. The wind howled louder, and somewhere in the cottage something crashed. Edward tensed, but Helena gripped his shirt. Don't leave. It wasn't a request. I'm not going anywhere. He settled them more comfortably, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Try to sleep, I'll keep watch. Edward? She was already drifting, exhausted. Thank you. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. For coming back. For finding me. For not giving up. He held her tighter, felt her breathing slow and steady as sleep took her. Outside, the storm showed no signs of stopping. Inside, Edward sat with the woman he loved in his arms, her husband's child moving between them, and made a silent promise to both Thomas and Helena. He would protect this family, prove his innocence, and make damn sure Helena never had to hide or run again, even if it cost him everything he had. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days trapped in the cottage with nowhere to run from the tension that simmered between them. 3 days of careful touches and loaded glances and conversations that meant more than the words being said. Helena woke from nightmares, and Edward would talk her through them. Edward pushed himself too hard fixing the roof, and Helena would bandage his scraped hands with those broken fingers of hers. They cooked together, ate together, sat by the fire at night reading aloud from the few books Helena had brought with her, and every night Edward slept on the floor by the fire while Helena took the bed, and both of them lay awake, listening to the other breathe. On the 3rd day, when the rain finally stopped and pale sun broke through the clouds, Dr. Pierce arrived looking grim. We need to talk. He stood in the doorway blocking the light. All of us. Edward moved protectively closer to Helena, who'd been mending clothes by the window. What's happened? Thomas's family. Pierce came inside, set his bag down heavily. His brother, Lord Richard Carstairs, has been making inquiries. He knows Helena is somewhere in this area. He's hired investigators, and he's promising a substantial reward for information about her whereabouts. Helena went pale. How long before they find me? Days, maybe. Pierce looked at Edward. Unless you do something, Your Grace. You have influence, connections. Can you stop them? I can try. But Edward knew it was futile. The Carstairs family was powerful, determined. Helena, we need to make a decision. Now. What kind of decision? But she already knew. He could see it in her eyes. Marriage. He knelt in front of her chair, took her hands. Today, before they find you. If you're the Duchess of Ashford, they can't touch you or the baby. The law protects a duke's wife. It's too fast. She pulled her hands away. Edward, the baby isn't even, I know. He forced himself to stay calm. I know it's fast. I know it's not how either of us imagined this. But Helena, if Richard finds you, he'll take you back. Take the baby. Lock you away somewhere until you're compliant enough to do whatever he wants. Is that what you want? Of course not. Tears filled her eyes. But I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He glanced at Pierce. Can you witness a marriage? I can. Pierce looked between them. Are you sure about this, Lady Carstairs? Marriage to a duke will mean scrutiny, scandal, society watching your every move. Better than being a prisoner. Edward cut in. Better than having her child stolen, better than— Let her answer! Pierce's tone was sharp. Helena stood, pacing the small room with her hand on her belly. If we marry now, everyone will know why. They'll count months. They'll say terrible things about the baby, about me, about you. I don't care what they say. You should. She turned to face him. Edward, you're a duke. You have responsibilities, a reputation, a position in society. If you marry me like this, they'll destroy you. Call you a fool, say I trapped you, question every decision you make from now on. Then let them. He stood, crossed to her. Helena, I've spent my whole life doing what was expected, being the perfect duke, making the right matches, saying the right things, never stepping out of line. And what did it get me? Watching the woman I love marry someone else, watching her suffer alone, losing my best friend to an illness I didn't recognize. So, yes, let society talk, let them judge. I'm done caring about anything except keeping you safe. She searched his face, and he saw the moment she broke. Okay. The word came out as a whisper. Okay, I'll marry you. Relief flooded through him. Now? Now. She took his hand, squeezed tight. Before I lose my nerve, before reality sets in, before— He kissed her, hard and fast. No second thoughts. No regrets. Lots of regrets. But she smiled through her tears. But none about you. Pierce cleared his throat. If we're doing this, we need another witness. And you'll need a license, which means— I have one. Edward pulled the folded paper from his pocket. Had my solicitor draw it up days ago. Just needed Helena to agree. She stared at the paper. You were that sure I'd say yes? I was that sure I'd convince you eventually. He spread the license on the table. Pierce, go get Mrs. Morrison from the farm down the road. She can witness. After Pierce left, Helena looked at the license with Edward's name and hers written out in legal script. This is insane. Completely. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, careful of the baby. Do you want to stop? No. She leaned back against him. That's the insane part. I don't want to stop. I should be terrified, but all I feel is— What? Safe. She turned in his arms. For the first time in years, I feel safe. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her nose. You are safe. I promise you that. Pierce returned with Mrs. Morrison, a practical woman in her 60s who looked at the scene with sharp eyes and said nothing. The ceremony was brief, almost brutally so. Edward spoke the vows with his whole heart. Helena's voice shook but never wavered. Pierce and Mrs. Morrison signed as witnesses, and just like that, Helena Carstairs became Helena Ashford, Duchess of Ashford, with a baby due any day, and a scandal that would follow them both for years. When the witnesses left, Edward and Helena stood alone in the cottage that had become their sanctuary. Well? Helena looked at her new husband. That happened. No regrets? He pulled her close. None. She kissed him, deeper this time, letting herself get lost in it. Take me to bed, Your Grace. He pulled back, searching her face. Helena, the baby, I can't risk— Not for that. Though heat flashed in her eyes. Just hold me. Let me fall asleep in your arms as your wife, not your friend's widow. Can we have that? He swept her up carefully, carried her to the bedroom, laid her down on the narrow bed. When he stretched out beside her, she curled into him, her back to his chest, his arms around her and the baby. Edward? Her voice was drowsy. What? I think I'm falling in love with you. His heart stopped. You think? I know. She turned her head, kissed his jaw. I've been falling for 10 years. I just couldn't admit it until now. He tightened his arms, buried his face in her hair. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. Good. She yawned. We can be terrified together. Within minutes she was asleep. Edward lay awake, listening to her breathe, feeling the baby kick against his arm, and marveling at how his life had changed in less than a week. The woman he'd loved for a decade was finally his. The scandal would be enormous. The challenges ahead were terrifying, but none of that mattered as much as this moment. Helena safe in his arms, his ring on her finger, and the future they'd build together stretching out ahead of them. Outside, the sun set on the cottage, and for the first time in 6 months, Edward let himself hope that everything might actually be all right. Edward left for London 3 days after the wedding, and Helena hated every second of his absence. She'd grown accustomed to his presence, the sound of him moving through the cottage, the warmth of his body beside hers at night, the safety of knowing he was there. Now the cottage felt empty, despite Mrs. Morrison checking on her twice daily and Dr. Pierce's regular visits. She tried to occupy herself with preparations for the baby, but her mind kept drifting to London, to Edward, surrounded by society, to beautiful women in silk gowns who weren't pregnant and scandal-ridden, to the life he'd left behind to marry her in secret. On the 4th day, Pierce arrived with newspapers. "You should see these before His Grace returns." His expression was grim. Helena unfolded the society pages and felt her stomach drop. The gossip columns were ablaze with speculation about the Duke of Ashford's sudden absence from town and the rumours of a hasty marriage. But worse was the illustrated story featuring a stunning blonde woman in an emerald gown. "Lady Beatrice Thornton at the Ashford ball," the caption read. Sources close to the family expected an announcement before the Duke's mysterious departure. "Who is she?" Helena's voice came out flat. "The woman everyone expected him to marry." Pierce sat across from her. "Wealthy family, impeccable reputation, beautiful. She's been pursuing him for 2 seasons, and he never mentioned her." Helena stared at the illustration. Lady Beatrice was everything she wasn't. Slender, elegant, unscarred by scandal. "Of course he didn't. He loves you." Pierce's tone was gentle. "Anyone with eyes can see that. Love doesn't erase reality." She set down the newspaper. "He gave up everything for me. His reputation, his position, his chance at a proper marriage. What if he wakes up one day and regrets it? Then he's a fool." Pierce leaned forward. "Helena, I've watched you both these past weeks. The way he looks at you, it's not obligation, it's not charity. That man is desperately in love with you." Desperate love fades. She touched her belly where the baby was unusually quiet today. What happens when the scandal gets worse, when society cuts him, when he realizes he's trapped? "You're not giving him enough credit." But Pierce's words felt hollow. Helena spent that night unable to sleep, imagining Edward at balls and dinners, Lady Beatrice on his arm, everyone whispering about his mistake. By morning, she'd convinced herself she'd ruined his life. Then Edward walked through the door. He looked exhausted, his clothes rumpled, shadows under his eyes. But when he saw her, his whole face transformed. "Helena." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulled her into his arms. "God, I missed you. You were only gone 4 days." But she clung to him, breathing in his scent. 4 days too many." He pulled back, cupped her face. "Are you all right? The baby?" "Fine. Both fine." She searched his eyes for regret, for doubt, for anything that confirmed her fears. "How was London?" His expression darkened. "Complicated. We need to talk." He guided her to sit, then told her everything. How he'd spent days tracking down anyone who might have sent those anonymous letters to Thomas. How he'd interviewed servants from Thomas's household who'd been dismissed in the final months. How he'd found the investigator who'd ruled the death an accident and learned there were details that never made the official report. Thomas's gun. Edward held her hands. It was found beside his body, but the investigator said the angle was wrong for suicide. Someone could have staged it to look that way. Helena felt cold. "You think someone murdered him?" "I think it's possible." He pulled out papers from his coat. "These are statements from 3 servants who all said the same thing. Thomas received multiple letters in his final weeks, letters that would arrive, make him furious or paranoid, then disappear. None of them saw who delivered the letters. None of them knew what they said. But the handwriting in his diary was his. I know." Edward ran his hand through his hair. "Helena, I think someone was manipulating him, feeding his paranoia, exploiting whatever mental illness he was suffering from, pushing him toward whatever happened that day. Who would do that? That's what I need to figure out." He showed her more papers. "Thomas changed his will 2 weeks before he died. Left everything to his brother Richard, with provisions that you'd be cared for appropriately, but gave Richard full control of the estate and any children." Helena's breath caught. "Richard benefits from Thomas's death." "Substantially." Edward's jaw clenched. "And Richard is now searching desperately for you and the baby. Not out of family concern, out of financial interest. That child is the Carstairs' heir. If Richard can control the baby, he controls the entire estate until the child comes of age." "Oh God." Helena stood, pacing. "That's why he's looking so hard. It's not about family honor or propriety. It's about money." "Exactly." Edward watched her pace. "Helena, I can't prove Richard killed Thomas or had him killed, not yet. But I can prove he stands to gain from your disappearance and the baby's acquisition. Which means I can never let him find me." She wrapped her arms around her belly. "He'll take the baby, claim I'm unfit and control everything." "He can't take the baby." Edward stood, pulled her close. "You're my wife now. That child will be born in Ashford. Richard has no legal claim." "Are you sure?" "Positive." He kissed her forehead. "I had my solicitors draw up papers making it absolutely clear. The baby is mine legally from the moment of birth. Richard can't touch either of you." She sagged against him in relief. "What about London? The scandal?" His expression shifted. "You saw the papers." "I saw Lady Beatrice." She pulled back to look at him. "Pierce brought them. She's beautiful, Edward. Everything I'm not." "She's nothing." He gripped her shoulders. "Helena, yes. People expected me to marry her. Yes, she made her interest clear. Yes, there will be talk about why I married you instead. I don't care. You asked what happened in London. I spent every minute either investigating or dodging marriage-minded mothers and dealing with people who don't matter. The only thing I cared about was getting back here, to you." "Lady Beatrice cornered me at a ball," he continued before she could interrupt. "Made it very clear she was still available, that a duke could have certain arrangements, that mistakes could be undone. I told her I made no mistake, that I married the only woman I've ever loved, that anyone who couldn't accept that could go to hell." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "You said that? At a ball? In front of everyone?" Loud enough for half the room to hear. A slight smile played at his lips. "I believe I've made us even more scandalous." "You're an idiot." But she was smiling through her tears. "A complete idiot who just destroyed his reputation for me. Best decision I ever made." He kissed her softly. "Now, let's talk about you. Pierce says you haven't been sleeping, that the baby's been quiet. Helena, what's wrong?" "I've been worried," she admitted. "About you, about the scandal, about whether you'd regret this. And the baby," she winced. "The baby feels different today. Lower, heavier." Edward went pale. "How different?" "I don't know. I've never done this before." She tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. "Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe the baby's coming." He was already moving, gathering supplies. "I'll get Pierce. You sit down. Don't move. Don't do anything." "Edward, I'm fine." She stopped, looked down. Water pooled around her feet on the floor. "Edward," her voice shook. "I think the baby's coming now." The next 12 hours were the longest of Edward's life. Pierce arrived within 20 minutes, took one look at Helena and started barking orders. Mrs. Morrison came with her daughter, who'd served as midwife before. They turned the bedroom into a birthing room, while Edward paced the main room like a caged animal. "Your Grace, perhaps you should wait outside," Mrs. Morrison suggested after the first hour. "Perhaps you should focus on your job and let me focus on mine." Edward didn't move from his position by the door. Helena's scream cut through the cottage, and every instinct in him roared to go to her. Pierce appeared, sleeves rolled up, face grim. "She's asking for you." Edward was through the door before Pierce finished speaking. Helena lay in the bed, sweat-soaked, face contorted with pain. When she saw him, she reached out desperately. "Edward, don't leave. Please don't leave. I'm not going anywhere." He took her hand, let her squeeze until his bones ground together. "I'm right here." "It hurts," she sobbed. "God, it hurts so much. I can't do this." "Yes, you can." He smoothed her hair back. "You're the strongest person I know. You've survived everything else. You'll survive this." Another contraction hit, and her scream tore through him. He held her hand, whispered encouragement, let her curse him and Thomas and every man who'd ever lived. "Mrs." Morrison kept checking, kept saying, "Not yet, not yet," and Edward wanted to shake her because how much more could Helena take? "Your Grace." Pierce pulled him aside during a brief respite. "This is taking too long. The baby's positioned wrong. If it doesn't turn in the next hour, we might have to— "Have to what?" Edward's voice was deadly quiet. "Help the birth along surgically. It's dangerous for both mother and child. But if the baby doesn't come naturally, do whatever you have to do. Edward gripped Pierce's arm. But save her. If it comes down to a choice, save Helena, do you understand? The baby, save my wife. His voice broke. Please. Pierce nodded grimly and went back to Helena. Edward returned to her side, held her hand, and prayed for the first time in years. Prayed to a God he wasn't sure existed that Helena would survive this, that the baby would be all right, that he wouldn't lose everything he'd just found. 2 more hours passed. Helena was weakening, her screams turning to whimpers. Pierce looked more worried with each examination. Mrs. Morrison whispered to her daughter about preparations Edward didn't want to understand. Then Helena gripped his hand with renewed strength. "The baby," she gasped. "I can feel it's coming. Edward, the baby's coming." Everything happened fast after that. Pierce and Mrs. Morrison working together, shouting instructions. Helena pushing with everything she had left. Edward holding her, supporting her, telling her she could do this even as terror clawed at his throat. And then, a cry. Not Helena, smaller, higher. The sound of new life. "It's a girl." Pierce held up a tiny red screaming bundle. A healthy girl. Edward couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Mrs. Morrison cleaned the baby quickly, wrapped her in soft cloth, and placed her in Helena's arms. "Your daughter, my lady." Helena looked down at the tiny face, and tears streamed down her cheeks. The baby had Thomas's eyes. Edward saw it immediately. Dark blue, the same shape. But she had Helena's nose, Helena's mouth. "She's perfect," Helena whispered. "Edward, look. She's perfect." He leaned in, touched one tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, and something in his chest cracked open. "She's beautiful." His voice was rough. "Like her mother. We should name her." Helena looked up at him. "I want to name her after Thomas's mother. Rose. Emilia Rose. Emilia Rose Ashford." Edward tested the name. "It's perfect." Pierce cleared his throat. "Your Grace, we're not finished. The afterbirth needs to come and—" He stopped, looked down. His hands came away covered in blood. "Helena?" Edward saw her face go white. Saw more blood. Too much blood. Soaking the sheets. "What's happening?" "She's hemorrhaging." Pierce took the baby, handed her to Mrs. Morrison. "Your Grace, you need to leave now." "Like hell." "Now!" Pierce's voice cracked like a whip. "I need room to work, and I need you not to see this. Take the baby, go." Mrs. Morrison pressed Emilia into Edward's arms and physically pushed him from the room. The door shut in his face. He stood there, holding a newborn baby, listening to Pierce shouting orders, and Helena's weak voice saying his name, and felt his world tilt on its axis. "She'll be all right." Mrs. Morrison's daughter appeared beside him. "Dr. Pierce is good at what he does. Your wife is strong." "She's bleeding." Edward looked down at the baby in his arms. "There's too much blood. Women bleed after birth, sometimes more than others. We'll know soon." The girl took Emilia. "Let me clean her properly while you wait." Edward couldn't move, couldn't think. He'd just gotten Helena, just married her, just admitted he loved her, just started building a life together. He couldn't lose her now, not like this, not after everything. The door opened. Pierce stood there, covered in blood, face exhausted. "She's alive." Edward's knees almost gave out. "She lost a lot of blood, she's weak, but she's alive and stable. I've done everything I can. Now she needs rest." "Can I see her?" 5 minutes. Pierce stepped aside. "She needs to sleep, Your Grace." Helena looked like a ghost against the white sheets. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, but her eyes were open, tracking him as he entered. "The baby?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Perfect, healthy, beautiful." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, took her hand. "Emilia Rose is perfect. I want to see her. Soon. Right now you need to rest." "I'm fine." But her eyes were already drifting closed. "Edward, don't leave." "I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her forehead. "Sleep. I'll be here when you wake up." She was asleep before he finished speaking. Edward sat there holding her hand, watching her breathe, and made another silent promise. He would protect this family. He would prove what happened to Thomas, and he would make damn sure Helena never faced danger like this again. Helena recovered slowly over the next 3 weeks. Too slowly for Edward's liking, but Pierce assured him it was normal after such a difficult birth. She tired easily, couldn't walk far without needing to rest, and the color didn't fully return to her cheeks for days, but she was alive. She was healing, and she was a fierce mother to little Amelia. Edward had never imagined he'd be the kind of man who changed nappies or walked a crying baby at 3 in the morning. But here he was, pacing the cottage with Amelia against his shoulder, singing off-key lullabies while Helena slept. The baby had Thomas's eyes. Every time Edward looked at her, he felt the weight of that, the friend he'd lost, the child who'd never know her real father. But he also felt fierce love for this tiny person who depended on him completely. "You have a good voice." Helena spoke from the bedroom doorway one night, wrapped in a shawl, watching him sway with the baby. "It's terrible." But he smiled. "You should be sleeping." "I've been sleeping for 3 weeks." She moved slowly, carefully, to sit in the chair by the fire. "I want to watch you with her. You're so gentle." "She's so small." He looked down at Amelia's sleeping face. "Terrifying how small she is." "You're a natural father." Helena's voice was soft. "Thank you for everything you've done. Everything you're doing." "She's my daughter." He said it firmly. "Legally, emotionally, in every way that matters. I'm her father." Thomas would have loved her. Helena's eyes filled with tears. Would have been so proud. He would have. Edward sat beside her, still holding the baby. "And I think I'd like to believe he'd be glad she has us, that she's safe and loved." "Do you think he knew?" She looked at him. "At the end? Do you think he knew what was happening to him? That his mind was—" "I don't know." Edward had thought about this constantly. "Part of me hopes he didn't, that he wasn't aware of his own deterioration. But part of me hopes he did know, so he understood it wasn't his fault, wasn't weakness or failure. I miss him." She said it quietly. "The him from before, from the beginning. Is that wrong? To miss my dead husband while sitting here with you? It's honest." He reached over, took her hand. "Helena, I don't expect you to stop loving Thomas. He was your husband, Amelia's father. You shared years together. I'm not trying to replace him. But you are, though." She squeezed his hand. "Replacing him as my husband, as Amelia's father figure, as the man who loves you now," he finished. "That's different. Thomas had his time with you. Now I have mine. There's room for both." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "How did I get so lucky to have 2 good men love me in one lifetime?" "I'm the lucky one." He kissed her hair. "You could have married Pierce, you know," he offered. "Pierce doesn't make my heart race." She tilted her head to look at him. "Doesn't make me feel alive the way you do. Safe, but also thrilled. Is that strange?" "If it is, we're both strange." He shifted Amelia to one arm so he could wrap the other around Helena. "Because you do the same to me. 10 years of wanting you, and now that I have you, it's even better than I imagined. Even with the scandal, the blood and screaming and very unglamorous reality of childbirth. Especially with all of that." He was serious. "You think I wanted some society marriage? Separate bedrooms and polite conversations? Helena, I want this. The messy, complicated, real parts. All of it." She kissed him then, soft and sweet. Amelia stirred between them, making small sounds. Helena pulled back, laughing. "Our daughter has terrible timing. She'll develop better timing eventually." Edward stood carefully, laid Amelia in the cradle he'd built. "Right now, let's get you back to bed before Pierce arrives for his evening check and yells at both of us. He's been very protective." Helena let Edward help her up, almost proprietary. "He's in love with you." Edward said it casually. "Has been since he found you. Can't really blame him." "Edward," she stopped. "Are you jealous of Dr. Pierce?" "Completely." He didn't bother lying. "Man saves your life, helps deliver your baby, gets to be noble and self-sacrificing. Yes, I'm jealous. But I also respect him for stepping back. There was never anything to step back from." She cupped his face. "You're the only one I want. The only one I've ever really wanted, if I'm being honest. Thomas was safe and proper and what I thought I should want. But you were the dangerous one. The one I couldn't have. The one who made me feel things I shouldn't feel. And now?" He pulled her closer, careful of her still healing body. "Now you're mine and I'm still dangerous. And you make me feel everything." She kissed him again, deeper this time. "Edward." His name was half prayer, half plea. "We can't yet." He forced himself to pull back. "Pierce said at least 6 weeks. You're still healing." "I know." But she stayed close, her forehead against his. "Doesn't mean I don't want to. Believe me, the feeling is mutual." He was barely holding himself back. "But I'm not risking you, not for anything." She smiled, tired but real. 6 weeks then." 6 weeks. He guided her to bed. tucked her in like a child. Sleep. I'll watch Amelia. Edward? She was already drifting. Thank you for choosing us, for giving up everything. I didn't give up anything. He smoothed her hair back. I finally got everything I wanted. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Edward was outside splitting wood when he heard horses. 3 riders approached. Richard Carstairs flanked by 2 men who looked like hired muscle. Edward set down the axe slowly, positioned himself between the cottage and the riders. Ashford. Richard dismounted, face cold. So the rumors are true. You did marry her. Lady Ashford is resting. Edward kept his voice level. State your business. My business is with my brother's widow and his child. Richard moved closer. I have legal rights. You have no rights. Edward cut him off. Helena is my wife. Any child born to my wife is legally mine. You have no claim. That baby was conceived while my brother was alive. Richard's voice rose. Everyone knows the timeline. You married her to steal the Carstairs heir. I married her because I love her. Edward's hands clenched. And because she needed protection from people like you who see her as property to be controlled. Protection? Richard laughed bitterly. You mean you swooped in like a vulture the moment Thomas was dead? Tell me, Ashford, how long were you waiting? How long were you planning this? Get off my property. Not without seeing the child. I have a right to know. You have no rights. Edward's control snapped. You abandoned Helena when she needed help. You spread rumors about her behavior. You hired investigators to hunt her down like an animal. You don't get to pretend you care about family now. The Carstairs estate is yours. Congratulations. Edward's voice dripped sarcasm. You got what you wanted. Thomas is dead. You inherited everything, but you don't get Helena. You don't get the baby. Accept it and leave, or I'll have you removed forcibly. Richard's face went purple. This isn't over. The courts will hear about this. Everyone will know what you did. Let them know. Edward stepped closer. Let everyone know I married a woman I love and protected her from a family that wanted to use her. See how that plays in society. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Richard mounted his horse. You'll regret this, Ashford. Both of you. They rode off and Edward stood there shaking with rage and residual fear. Helena appeared in the doorway, pale but steady. I heard everything. I'm sorry. He came to her. I shouldn't have lost my temper. You were magnificent. She smiled despite everything. Fierce and protective and exactly what I needed. He'll cause trouble, Edward warned. Probably, but we'll handle it together. She took his hand. Edward, I need to tell you something. About the baby. About Thomas. His heart sank. What? The timing. She met his eyes. I know what everyone will say. That Amelia might not be Thomas's. That the dates are suspicious. Edward, I need you to know. She is Thomas's child. We were intimate right before everything fell apart. She's his. I would never lie about that. I know. He pulled her close. Helena, I know. And even if there was doubt, even if the timing made it impossible to be sure, it wouldn't matter. She's ours. That's all that counts. You mean that? Completely. He kissed her forehead. Thomas's daughter. Our daughter. It's all the same to me. I love her because she's part of you. Because she's part of the family we're building. That's enough. She buried her face in his chest and cried. He held her while she released months of fear and shame and uncertainty, and when she finally pulled back, she looked lighter somehow. I think I'm ready, she said. Ready for what? To stop hiding. She looked at the road where Richard had disappeared. To face society. To live as the Duchess of Ashford instead of a fugitive in a cottage. Are you ready for that scandal? I've been ready since I married you. He took her hand. Let's go home to Ashford Hall. Let's show everyone exactly who we are and who we're not afraid to be. Together? Always together. Moving to Ashford Hall was like stepping into a different world. The manor house that Edward had abandoned weeks ago felt impossibly grand after the tiny cottage. Servants lined up to meet their new Duchess, curiosity and judgment warring in their expressions. Helena held Amelia close, chin high, refusing to show fear. This is Lady Ashford and my daughter Amelia. Edward made the introduction firm and clear. They will be treated with the utmost respect. Anyone who has a problem with that can collect their wages and leave. Understood? Murmured assents rippled through the assembled staff. The housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, an older woman with shrewd eyes, stepped forward. Welcome to Ashford Hall, Your Grace. We've prepared the ducal suite. Thank you. Helena's voice was steady. I'll need a nursery set up near our rooms, and I prefer to care for my daughter myself, so I won't need a wet nurse. Whispers at that. Duchesses didn't nurse their own babies. But Mrs. Davies just nodded. As you wish, my lady. I'll have everything arranged. That first week was brutal. Society had already heard about the scandalous marriage. Gossip travelled faster than horses. The invitations that had flooded Edward's desk before dried up completely. The few visitors who did call came out of morbid curiosity more than politeness. Lady Beatrice arrived on the third day, all false smiles and barbed comments. Your Grace, she curtsied to Helena with barely concealed disdain. How unexpected. I'm sure all of London is simply dying to meet you. Then they're welcome to call. Helena refused to be intimidated. Though I'm afraid I'm quite busy with my daughter. Perhaps you'd like to meet her. A baby. Beatrice's smile was razor-sharp. How convenient the timing worked out. Tell me, when exactly did the Duke propose? That's none of your concern. Edward appeared, positioning himself firmly beside Helena. Lady Thornton, I believe you were just leaving. I was simply leaving. His tone left no room for argument. After Beatrice swept out in a rustle of silk and fury, Helena sagged against him. She's right. Everyone's going to count the months, do the math, question Amelia's paternity. Let them. He turned her to face him. Helena, we know the truth. That's all that matters. Is it? She pulled away. Edward, look at this house. Look at your life. You're a duke. You need heirs that are unquestionably yours. What if we never have children together? What if Emilia is the only our stop? He gripped her shoulders. First, Emilia is mine, in every way that counts. Second, we will have children together. Many, if you want them. But even if we don't, even if it's just us and Emilia, that's enough. You are enough. She searched his face for doubt and found none. How are you so sure? Because I've spent 10 years knowing exactly what I want. He pulled her into his arms. And I have it now. Everything else is just noise. That night, they hosted their first dinner as a married couple. Edward had invited carefully selected friends, people he knew would support them regardless of scandal. The dinner was small, intimate, nothing like the grand affairs he used to host. Helena wore a simple dress, still adjusting to her post-pregnancy body, hair styled elegantly but not elaborately. She looked beautiful and nervous and entirely herself. Edward watched her charm his friends with her honesty, her quick wit, her refusal to pretend everything was perfect. She admitted the marriage was fast, that the scandal was real, that she was still grieving Thomas while learning to love again. The vulnerability disarmed them completely. By dessert, even the most skeptical guests were won over. After everyone left, Helena found Edward in his study. That went well. You were perfect. He pulled her onto his lap. Honest and real and exactly what they needed to see. I was terrified, she admitted. Kept thinking they could all see through me, see that I don't belong here. You belong exactly here. He kissed her neck. You're the Duchess of Ashford, my wife, Emilia's mother. Where else would you be? The cottage sometimes felt safer, but she relaxed against him. Smaller, less exposed. We can go back whenever you want. He meant it. Keep it as a retreat. Just ours. I'd like that. She turned in his arms. Edward, it's been 6 weeks. He went still. Pierce said, 8 weeks, actually. He checked me yesterday, said I'm fully healed. She kissed him softly. Said we can, that it's safe. Heat flooded through him. Helena, are you sure? I don't want to rush you. I'm sure. She stood, held out her hand. Take me to bed, Your Grace. Properly this time. He followed her upstairs, closed and locked their bedroom door. When he turned, she was already unlacing her dress. Let me. He crossed to her, replaced her hands with his. Let me do this right. He undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each new bit of exposed skin. She'd changed since he'd last seen her like this. Her body marked by pregnancy, by childbirth, by everything she'd survived. He traced each mark with his fingers, his lips, showing her without words that she was beautiful. When she reached for his clothes, he let her explore him the way he was exploring her. When they finally came together, it was slow and tender and completely overwhelming. I love you. He breathed it against her neck. God, Helena, I love you so much. I love you too. She held him tighter. Only you. Always you. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand tracing patterns on her spine. "Edward?" Her voice was drowsy. "Did you ever imagine this? When you were watching me from across ballrooms, did you imagine we'd end up here?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "late at night when I couldn't sleep. I'd imagine what it would be like if you were mine. But the reality is so much better than anything I dreamed, even with all the scandal and complications. Especially with those." He tightened his arms. "You're real, Helena, this is real. Not some perfect fantasy, but actual life with all its mess and beauty. I wouldn't trade it for anything." She kissed his chest right over his heart. "Neither would I." 6 months later, Helena walked into the ballroom at Ashford Hall with her head held high. The scandal hadn't died. It had evolved into reluctant acceptance. They'd never be the golden couple of society, but they'd carved out their own space. People came to their dinners because the conversation was interesting, their parties because the atmosphere was genuine, and gradually, grudgingly, society adapted. Emilia was 6 months old now, happy and healthy, with Thomas's dark curls and Helena's smile. Edward was completely besotted, could be found most evenings in the nursery teaching his daughter nonsense songs. Helena had started playing piano again, not the perfect, polished performances she used to give, but music that meant something. Edward would sit and listen for hours, mesmerized. Tonight's ball was their official entrance back into society. Everyone who mattered was here, including people who'd cut them months ago. Helena wore dark green silk, not black anymore, having passed the full mourning period for Thomas. She looked stunning and knew it. Edward couldn't stop staring. "Stop looking at me like that," she murmured as they greeted guests. "People will talk. Let them." He took her hand, kissed it. "I'm looking at my beautiful wife. If that's scandalous, so be it." Lady Beatrice arrived fashionably late, escorted by a viscount who looked bored. She made a point of greeting Helena with excessive politeness. "Your Grace, how domestic you look. Motherhood suits you." "Thank you." Helena refused to take the bait. "And you look lovely as always, Lady Thornton. I hope you enjoy the evening." Beatrice's smile turned sharp. "I'm sure it will be memorable. Tell me, is it true your daughter has the late Viscount's eyes? Everyone's been simply dying to know." The room went quiet. Every person nearby suddenly became very interested in their champagne. Helena felt Edward tense beside her, but she laid a gentle hand on his arm. "Yes," she said clearly. "Emilia has her father's eyes. Thomas would have been so proud of her. Just as I'm sure he'd be grateful that she has a father figure like the Duke to guide her now. Don't you think it's wonderful when families support each other through tragedy?" The shift was brilliant. Suddenly Beatrice looked petty and cruel, while Helena looked gracious and kind. Murmurs of approval rippled through the nearby guests. Beatrice's smile became fixed. "Of course. How fortunate for everyone." She moved on quickly, and Helena let out a slow breath. "Well done," Edward whispered. "You just won that round decisively." "I'm so tired of rounds," she admitted. "Can't we just exist, without every conversation being a battle?" "Someday." He pulled her onto the dance floor. "For now, let's just dance." They waltzed, and Helena let herself get lost in it. In the music, in Edward's arms, in the life they'd built despite everything. When the dance ended, she saw Pierce across the room. He'd come at her invitation, their first real conversation since the wedding. "Go talk to him." Edward nudged her gently. "He deserves that." Helena approached Pierce, who looked uncomfortable in formal wear. "Doctor, thank you for coming. Your Grace." He bowed properly. "You look well." "I am well. Happy." She met his eyes. "Samuel, I wanted to thank you for everything you did for me, for saving my life, for—" "You don't need to thank me." He cut her off gently. "I did what any doctor would do. We both know that's not true." She touched his arm briefly. "You cared for me when I had nothing, protected me when I was vulnerable. I'll never forget that. But you love him." "It wasn't a question." "I do." She didn't apologize for it. "I always did, even when I shouldn't have. But that doesn't diminish what you meant to me, what you still mean to me as a friend." Pierce smiled, and it was genuine this time. "I'm glad you're happy, truly. And your daughter, she's beautiful. Would you like to meet her properly? Come to dinner next week. Bring whoever you'd like." His eyebrows rose. "You're inviting me to dinner. Your family," Helena said firmly. "Not in the conventional sense, but family nonetheless. The man who brought my daughter into the world safely. I hope you'll always be part of our lives." "I'd like that." He looked relieved. "Thank you, Your Grace." Edward joined them, extended his hand. "Pierce, thank you for coming, and for everything." Pierce shook his hand. "Take care of them, Your Grace. With my life." Edward pulled Helena close. "Always." Later, as the party wound down, Richard Carstairs appeared. He looked older somehow, worn down. Edward immediately stepped in front of Helena, protective. "Richard." His voice was cold. "I wasn't aware you were invited." "I wasn't." Richard's voice was tired. "I came to apologize." Helena stepped out from behind Edward. "Apologize? For everything? The investigation, the accusations, the way I treated you after Thomas's death." Richard looked at the floor. "I was angry, lost my brother and couldn't accept that it was just that he was sick, needed someone to blame, made you the villain when you were just another victim." Helena exchanged a glance with Edward. "Go on." "I've been doing research, talking to Thomas's doctors from years ago. Our family—" Richard's voice cracked. "Our mother died in an asylum. Did you know that? She had episodes, heard voices, became violent. Thomas and I were told it was consumption. We never knew the truth until I started digging after everything. Thomas never told me." Helena's voice softened. "He never said anything about his mother's real illness. Because he was ashamed, terrified he'd inherited it, and he did." Richard looked up, eyes red. "The doctors confirmed it. Same symptoms as her. Progressive paranoia, delusions, violent episodes. It killed her. It killed him. And He stopped. "I blamed you because I couldn't face that my brother was broken in a way I couldn't fix. I'm sorry, I'm so damn sorry." Edward felt his anger deflate. This man was grieving, drowning in guilt and loss. "We accept your apology." He looked at Helena, who nodded. "Richard, we don't blame you. You lost your brother. We understand." "Can I see her?" Richard asked quietly. "My niece. Just once. To know she's all right." Helena hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Next month, at our country house. Supervised, and if you ever threaten us again—" "I won't, I swear it." Richard bowed. "Thank you, both of you, for being more gracious than I deserve." After he left, Helena sagged against Edward. "That was unexpected. Are you all right?" "I think so." She looked up at him. "It doesn't fix anything, doesn't change what he did. But it's a start." Edward finished. Maybe we can all move forward now." 3 years later, Edward woke to small hands patting his face. "Papa. Papa, wake up, Mama says come see." He opened his eyes to find Emilia leaning over him. Dark curls, wild, eyes, Thomas's eyes, bright with excitement. "What's Mama want me to see?" "The baby." Emilia bounced on the bed. "The baby's moving." Edward smiled, scooped his daughter up as he stood. She was 3 now, chattering constantly, fearless and bright. He carried her to the window, where Helena stood in her nightgown, hand on her very pregnant belly. "Feel." She grabbed his hand, placed it on her stomach. Under his palm, strong kicks. Their child. His and Helena's. The baby they'd tried for, hoped for, and were finally about to meet. Strong. He kissed her neck. "Just like you. Or stubborn like you." She leaned back against him. "We still haven't decided on names." "I like Rose," Emilia announced. "For a girl. Like my middle name." "We already have one Rose." Helena smoothed her daughter's hair. "What about Charlotte? Or James, if it's a boy," Edward suggested. They'd been having this conversation for months. The baby kicked again, and all 3 of them laughed. The old cottage had become their retreat, just as Edward promised. They spent weekends there, away from society, just being family. Emilia loved it, running through the fields, helping Helena in the garden, learning to fish with Edward. Today they were heading there for a full week, summer holiday before the baby came. Mrs. Davies supervised the packing while Emilia helped by carrying her favorite stuffed rabbit around importantly. "Uncle Richard's coming tomorrow," Helena reminded Edward, "with his new wife. Are you comfortable with that?" Richard had slowly rebuilt their relationship over the past years. Remarried to a kind woman who worked with mental health reform. Together, they'd started a foundation in Thomas's name to help families dealing with similar illnesses. He visited Emilia regularly now, not as a threat, but as family. "I'm comfortable." Edward pulled Helena close. "He's changed, proven himself, and Emilia deserves to know her uncle." "Mama," Emilia called from downstairs, "can I bring the piano book to the cottage? Yes, darling, Helena called back. Then to Edward, quieter, she has your mother's musical talent, and Thomas's stubbornness, and your kindness. He kissed her. Perfect combination. Papa. Emilia appeared again. Mrs. Davies says we're leaving in 10 minutes. Are you ready? Almost. He caught his daughter, tossed her in the air. Her shriek of laughter filled the house. At the cottage, they fell into easy routine. Edward chopped wood while Helena supervised Emilia's attempts at piano practice. They ate simple meals at the scarred table, played in the stream behind the cottage, watched sunsets from the porch. That night, after Emilia was asleep, Edward and Helena sat by the fire. Do you miss it? She asked. The grand parties? Society events? Not even a little. He pulled her into his lap carefully. This is everything I want. You, Emilia, this baby, our family. The rest is just noise. We've come so far. She rested her head on his shoulder. Sometimes I can't believe we made it here. I always knew we would. He stroked her hair. From that first night in the rain, when I found you, I knew we'd end up here somehow. Even when I was screaming at you, accusing you of murder, especially then, he smiled. You've never been more beautiful than when you were fierce and angry and fighting for what you believed in. Liar. But she was smiling too. I was a mess. You were magnificent. He turned her face to his. You still are. Every day. She kissed him, deep and slow. I love you, Edward Ashford. I love you too. He rested his hand on her belly. Both of you. The baby kicked in response and they laughed together. Later, lying in the bed they'd shared that first night, Helena curled against him. Edward thought about how strange life was, how tragedy and scandal had brought them here, how losing Thomas, grieving him, honoring him, had somehow made room for this happiness. Edward, Helena's voice was drowsy. Do you think he knows? Thomas, that we're happy? I think so. He tightened his arms. I think he'd be glad. That you're safe and loved. That Emilia has a family. That we're living instead of just surviving. I hope you're right. She was quiet for a moment. I miss him sometimes. The man he was before the illness. But I don't regret us. Not for a second. Neither do I. He kissed the top of her head. Get some sleep. Tomorrow Emilia will have us up at dawn chasing butterflies. She's your daughter. She's her mother's daughter. Stubborn and brave and absolutely sure of what she wants. Helena laughed softly. Fair point. Within minutes, she was asleep. Edward lay awake a while longer, listening to her breathe, feeling the baby move occasionally, hearing Emilia make small sounds in her sleep in the next room. This was his life now, not the one he'd planned as a young duke, not the proper society marriage everyone expected, but real, messy, beautiful, perfect. He'd found Helena in a storm, lost and broken. She'd found him carrying guilt and unspoken love. Together they'd built something neither of them could have built alone. A family, a home. A love worth every scandal, every obstacle, every sacrifice. The rain had stopped years ago, but the life they'd found in its aftermath was better than any sunshine. Epilogue. The baby came on a clear summer morning, with far less drama than Emilia's birth. A healthy boy they named James Thomas Ashford. James for Edward's father, Thomas to honor the friend they'd lost. Emilia was beside herself with excitement, insisted on helping with everything, announced to anyone who'd listen that she was the best big sister in England. Richard and his wife visited, brought gifts, stayed the appropriate amount of time. Watching Richard hold his nephew, seeing the gentle way he interacted with Emilia, Helena felt the last bit of anger she'd carried dissolve. They'd all been victims of circumstance and illness. All of them were healing now. Doctor. Pierce came to check on Helena and meet the baby. He'd married a widow from the next county over. A good match. When he held James, pronounced him perfectly healthy, and congratulated them both, there was no lingering awkwardness. Just friendship and mutual respect. Lady Beatrice had married her bored viscount and moved to Scotland. The gossip about Helena and Edward had faded into old news, replaced by newer scandals. Some members of society still whispered, still judged. But most had accepted what was undeniable. The Duke and Duchess of Ashford were genuinely, obviously in love. On James's christening day, Helena stood in the chapel at Ashford Hall, wearing soft blue silk, watching Edward hold their son while the priest said the blessing. Emilia stood beside them in a new dress, holding Edward's hand, taking her role as big sister very seriously. Afterward, at the reception, Edward found Helena on the terrace, taking a moment alone. "Hiding from our guests?" He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Thinking," she leaned back against him, "about how different everything could have been if you hadn't found me that night. If Thomas hadn't. If things had gone differently. But they didn't." He turned her to face him. "This is what happened. This is where we ended up. And I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the scandal, the accusations, all the hardship. Not if changing it meant losing this." He gestured back toward the party where Emilia was showing James off to anyone who'd look. "Our family, our life together. Helena, I'd walk through 10 times worse to end up here with you." She touched his face. This man who'd loved her patiently for a decade, who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd made her his despite every obstacle. "I used to think love was supposed to be easy, safe, predictable like it was with Thomas before he got sick. But this is messy and complicated and absolutely worth it," he finished. "Exactly." She kissed him. "I love you, more than I knew I could love anyone. I love you too." He held her close. "Thank you for choosing me, for giving me this life. Thank you for not giving up on me." She rested her head on his chest. "For finding me in that cottage, for seeing past all my defenses and loving me anyway." From inside, they heard Emilia's laugh, bright and clear. James started crying, probably hungry. Their guests would be wondering where they were, but for this moment, Edward and Helena stayed on the terrace, holding each other, married 3 years, but feeling like they'd just begun. The scandal had faded. The wounds had healed. Thomas's memory lived on in Emilia's eyes, and James's middle name, honored but not haunting. And the love that had waited 10 years to exist openly finally had room to breathe and grow and become everything it was always meant to be. They went back inside together, hand in hand, to their children and their guests and their imperfect, beautiful life. The Duke had found Helena in an empty cottage during a storm, and in finding her, he'd found everything he'd been missing. Sometimes, the most unexpected paths lead to the most perfect destinations.